and welcome to our morning edition of Arirang News. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour. South Korea successfully launched its domestically developed space rocket Nuri, putting satellites into a target orbit about 600 kilometers above Earth. This was the rocket's first nighttime launch and the fourth of 6 planned launches the country plans to make through 2027. Korea's central bank has decided to keep its key interest rate steady amid rising housing prices and the sharp depreciation of the South Korean won against the US dollar. Dozens have been killed and hundreds more remain missing after a massive fire spread across multiple high-rise apartment buildings in a Hong Kong housing complex. 3 people have reportedly been arrested on suspicion of manslaughter. We begin this morning with a major milestone in South Korea's space program. The country successfully launched its homegrown rocket Nuri in the early hours of this morning, placing more than a dozen satellites into orbit. Our correspondent Park Gun-woo reports from the Naro Space Center in Gohung.
3, 2, 1. Off Korea's homegrown Nuri rocket goes, soaring into space for its 4th mission. Lifting off from Gyeonggung County in Jeollanam province in the country's southwest at 1:13 a.m. on Thursday. This liftoff came 18 minutes later than scheduled, after an abnormal signal was detected in the umbilical retraction pressure sensor. But despite concerns over the delay, Nuri thundered into the sky with confidence, as if proving itself once again. The mission's success was confirmed about 90 minutes later as the main satellite among the 13 satellites on board reached an orbit of 601.3 kilometers, well within the 600-kilometer target in the 6% error range.
Following the successful third launch, the 4th mission has further strengthened Nuri's reliability and reaffirmed Korea's autonomous space development capabilities. Nuri will conduct 2 additional flights through 2027 to enhance its technical stability and performance.
He added that Korea will also push forward with the next-generation launch vehicle, building on the technology and experience gained from the Nuri program. And beyond its success, this 4th launch drew special attention as it was the first time Nuri ever flew at night. As this marks the first nighttime launch among all previous Nuri rocket projects, today's mission has even greater significance, providing ideal conditions for the main satellite to observe auroras. Launching at night was intentional, as nighttime conditions helped the main satellite enter the perfect orbit for aurora observation. The mission also saw more satellites than ever before, 13 in total, up from the 7 carried in the previous launch 2.5 years ago. Adding to the milestone, this 4th vehicle was manufactured entirely by the private company Hana Aerospace, marking a major step in Korea's shift toward a private sector-driven launch system and a deeper transfer of space technology. With today's achievement, excitement is already building for the next 2 Nuri missions in the coming years, in 2026 and 2027. Park Gun-woo, Arirang News, Gohung.
So South Korea has now successfully launched its largest satellite yet from its domestically developed space rocket Nuri. For more on this, we're joined today by Shin Dong-hyuk, Assistant Professor at the Department of Aerospace Engineering at the Korea Advanced Institute of Science and Technology. Professor Shin, thanks for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
So this was the 4th launch of the rocket, and it's being called a turning point in South Korea's space industry. What does the success of the latest launch mean for the country's space development?
So first of all, this is a 3 consecutive success, meaning that we are getting more confidence on rocket technology. And then secondly, as the report mentioned, it's been the assembly and the manufacturing was all done by the private company called Hana Aerospace. So this is a move to make the Nuri as a commercial rocket in the future. And then there are 2 aspects as well. So one is it was launched at nighttime, and then time window was very short, only 20 minutes. And then this requirement comes from the main customer, which is a next generation medium satellite 3. So in the end, Nuri rocket is a kind of delivery service, and then they have to meet the kind of requirement or the demand from the customer, and then so that Nurio is kind of accommodating those specific demand from the main customer. Also, there are 12 CubeSats, and in space industry, it's very important to have experience. And then so far, 12 university and companies are gaining experience from this launch.
I see. And Nuri lifted off with a payload this time that was twice as heavy as the one, carried during its third launch back in 2023. And this was its first nighttime launch, right? What was the most crucial step Nuri had to complete for this launch to succeed?
So actually, Nuriho is is designed to carry 1.5 tons of satellite. So far, Nuri still has a room to carry 500 kilogram more. But from a satellite perspective, heavy satellites are very expensive, and then they want to be carried by very reliable rockets. So now we can see the trend that the weight of satellite are increasing. Last time, the main satellite was around 100 kilograms. This time, it's around 500 kilograms. So more expensive satellite, they start to trust Nurio, Nurio's capability. And then it was a night launch, and then also it was in November, late November. So actually, the engineers had to fight with the dark and cold. So I saw many people was holding the hand warmer. So it can be another challenge. And then secondly, HANA's participation. So for example, Kari, they are developing rockets for almost 20 years. And then they have a lot of experience during that time. But HANA, they have to catch up all those things in 2 years, so last 2 years. So it'll be a very challenging task. And then I'm happy to see that they done it very well.
Right, and the main satellite was much heavier and much more expensive, as you mentioned. And it will be used to conduct research on a wide range of fields, right, including observing auroral activity and testing life science experiments in space. So how significant is this?
So, actually, the next generation satellites 3, they are developed to conduct a scientific activity. And then, as you mentioned, the first one is aurora activity. So actually, it's related to space weather and then also sun's activity. So for example, I'm sure you will be using GPS. For example, I do use it a lot. And then one thing I really want from GPS is that they know my lane in the car so that they tell me which lane to change. But current GPS, they cannot do that because of the accuracy. So current GPS has around the 10 meter of accuracy. But in order to kind of increase the accuracy, we need to know the space weather, and then the aurora observation can be a good indicator for the space weather. And then secondly, the life science experiments. So one of the very promising industry in space, it will be pharmaceutical development. So if you develop some medicine in no gravity, and then they can create a unique protein out of them. So it can be a very promising industry in the future, and then we are kind of putting the first step on this.
I see. That's very interesting how the GPS development will be helpful, will make driving much more easier for a lot of people. So what's next for Korea's space development?
So there are two big plans ahead. So one is to upgrade Nuriho. Of course, the name will be different. So probably there will be some competition to name the next generation rocket. So once we have the upgraded Nuriho, so we can send a spacecraft to Moon. So at the same time, we also, the Korean government is also developing a spacecraft which land on Moon as well. And then if we are getting successful, so combining both of them, we will become the sixth country in doing that. And then there are many other activities as well.
I see. That sounds very exciting. We'll have to see how that goes. All right, Professor Shin, thank you so much for your insight this morning. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
오, 4, 3, 2, 엔진 점화.
Now, on the economic front, South Korea's central bank has held its benchmark interest rate steady at 2.5%. The Bank of Korea announced a decision this morning following the final Monetary Policy Committee meeting of the year. The rate freeze comes amid rising housing prices in the capital area and a continued weakening of the Korean won against the US dollar. The central bank's decision comes after its governor Lee Chang-yong had recently said that while the official policy path points toward a rate cut cycle, the timing and scale of any move will depend entirely on incoming data. In other news, the National Assembly will vote on an arrest motion for former People Power Party floor leader Chu Kyung-ho later today. Chu is under investigation for his alleged involvement in former President Yoon Suk-yeol's brief martial law declaration last December. Prosecutors say Chu obstructed his own party members from attending a key parliamentary vote to lift Yoon's martial law decree. They allege he repeatedly changed the location of an emergency party meeting on the night of December 3rd at Yoon's request. Under Korean law, sitting lawmakers cannot be arrested while Parliament is in session unless the National Assembly approves the motion. The deadliest fire Hong Kong has seen in more than 60 years has left dozens dead and many more injured or unaccounted for, after flames ripped through several high-rise residential towers in the northern district of Tai Po. Our Pyeongyang has more.
A massive fire that tore through multiple high-rise residential blocks in Hong Kong's northern Tai Po district has left at least 44 people dead and more than 270 unaccounted for. The blaze erupted on Wednesday at the Wang Fu Court housing complex, a cluster of 8 blocks with almost 2,000 units, which is home to more than 4,600 residents, many of them elderly.
Around 2:45 p.m. in the afternoon, I suddenly heard a very loud noise. Then I looked outside and saw in the distance that over by Block 5 there was a fire.
Flames shot up the exterior of the 32-story buildings, fueled by bamboo scaffolding and temporary construction mesh installed for year-long renovation works. Several adjacent towers caught fire as the blaze jumped across the structures. Authorities say some residents remain trapped on upper floors, where firefighters have struggled to gain access due to intense heat, debris, and collapsing scaffolding. Hong Kong officials vowed full government mobilization.
I take this incident with the utmost seriousness. I have instructed all government departments and units to make every effort on multiple fronts. Our top priority is to extinguish the fire and rescue the trapped residents.
More than 10 hours after the fire broke out, thick smoke continued to pour from the towers as rescue crews worked through the evening, setting up shelters for nearly 900 displaced residents. Police have arrested 3 men from a construction company, 2 directors and an engineering consultant on suspicion of manslaughter. Police say they are investigating the construction firm responsible for maintenance work on the building, with Senior Superintendent Aileen Chung saying authorities have reason to believe those in charge were grossly negligent. Investigators say they found non-fireproof mesh, protective film, and styrofoam materials on the building exteriors, raising concerns about safety violations. As the search continues, missing person reports have flooded community apps, many describing elderly residents or individuals last seen on the upper floors of blocks E and F. This marks Hong Kong's worst fire since 1962, when 44 people were killed in Kowloon. Pyeongyang, Arirang News.
Meanwhile, over in the United States, 2 members of the National Guard were shot and seriously wounded on Wednesday near the White House. The incident prompted an immediate lockdown of the White House, although President Donald Trump was in Florida at the time. Our Lee Seung-jae has more.
Authorities in the U.S. say a suspect is in custody after 2 members of the National Guard were shot on Wednesday in a busy area of downtown Washington, D.C., not far from the White House. The incident prompted an immediate lockdown of the building, although President Donald Trump was in Florida at the time. The shooting unfolded during the late afternoon when foot traffic and government activity in the area were still heavy. An officer from the D.C. Metropolitan Police said a back and forth had occurred after the suspect turned a corner and opened fire at the National Guard members. FBI Director Kash Patel said both guardsmen are in a critical condition. The motive behind the attack also remains unknown, and investigators are now reviewing surveillance footage and interviewing witnesses who were in the area at the time. The suspect was taken into custody after he was shot and subdued by other Guard members nearby.
On a somber note, we had, and some of you may have seen this on your phones or on social media, but apparently there was a shooting outside the White House just a couple of hours ago. And we're still learning everything. We still don't know the motive. There's a lot that we haven't yet figured out. But what we
Speaking to troops in Kentucky on Wednesday, Vice President J.D. Vance called on anyone who's a person of faith to say a prayer for the 2 National Guardsmen. Tourists close to the crime scene were also caught up in the incident as shots were fired in an area that's heavily secured.
I was walking around and I was trying to get to the White House, and I see all the guns drawn and I see all the weapons, and I see all the Secret Service out, and I was like, okay, something happened. So what happened?
Authorities say the area around the White House has returned to normal operations, but the investigation is expected to remain active for some time. Federal and local agencies are coordinating to determine whether the shooter acted alone, what led to the encounter, and whether the victims were targeted specifically or were caught in a broader confrontation. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Chu Ji-hyun, and this is the world now. In West Africa, officers from Guinea-Bissau's military declared they had seized power after gunfire erupted on Wednesday near the presidential palace in the capital ahead of the announcement of presidential election results. Government sources told the BBC that President Umaro Sissoco Embalo was detained along with his election challenger Fernando Diaz, former Minister Domingo Perella, and Interior Minister Boche Kande. Officers appeared on state television announcing that they had suspended the electoral process, closed the country's borders, and imposed a nighttime curfew. They said they acted to prevent what they called an attempt by unnamed politicians backed by a well-known drug baron to destabilize the country. The generals leading the takeover also detained the chief of army and his deputy. Guinea-Bissau has experienced multiple coups or attempts over the past 5 decades. In Thailand, authorities declared the southern province of Song Khai the disaster zone after days of torrential rain left at least 33 people dead and thousands stranded. Officials said flooding has hit 9 southern provinces, affecting more than 2 million people and forcing 13,000 into shelters on Wednesday. The city of Hat Yai has been one of the worst hit, with floodwaters rising up to 2 meters after record rainfall. Thailand's military has deployed aircraft and boats to deliver medicine, food, and water as emergency teams report being overwhelmed by calls for help. In Peru, a court sentenced former President Martin Vizcarra to 14 years in prison for taking bribes worth more than $600,000 during his time as governor in Moquegua. The court has also issued a 9-year ban on holding public office on Wednesday. Vizcarra says he will appeal, calling the ruling, quote, revenge, but officials say he is expected to begin serving his sentence immediately. He joins several other former Peruvian presidents already jailed in corruption cases, highlighting the country's ongoing political instability. In the U.S., a loggerhead sea turtle that drew more than 100 million views online during life-saving treatment in the Florida Keys was released back into the ocean on Wednesday. The turtle, named Molly, had been rescued from a crab trap line and had a massive tumor weighing approximately 4.6 kilos removed during a 3-hour surgery. According to the Key West Turtle Hospital, Molly is the first loggerhead of her size to survive such a removal. Staff says her recovery marks a major breakthrough in treating the virus-driven disease.
Showers began along the west coast earlier and will spread nationwide by the afternoon. Some of this rain will get heavy with gusty winds and thunderstorms with 5 to 20 millimeters in the forecast. And of course, at higher elevation where temperatures are lower, rain will turn to snow. So mountainous areas of Gangwon-do province could get up to 10 centimeters, possibly enough for a heavy snow advisory. Winds, however, will be strong throughout the day, especially along the west coast and Jeju Island, with a wind advisory being in place. And this afternoon, highs will be similar to yesterday. Seoul, Daejeon both topping out at 10 degrees, Gwangju at 12 degrees. Rain should gradually ease from the late afternoon. Once the rain clears, much colder air will move in tonight. And by tomorrow morning, many regions, including Seoul, will drop below freezing. And this weekend, another round of rain is expected for the capital area and west of Gangwon-do province. But for today, please stay safe in the wind.
That's all we have for this morning. Arirang News will be back at noon Korea time. Thanks for watching.